or how does your Indigenous identity inform your work?
I can go first. Something that has come up for me is the question of what is an Indigenous life and who lives it. Just in the context of indigeneity for me it has to do with genealogy, and it also has to do with connection to land. This does not mean that folks cannot live by Indigenous principles, but it is important to understand like that connection to lands that birth people, that our languages, we grew our languages from these lands, we stewarded these lands. So I think of the fact that I'm living an American experience, and that is an important distinction to make in order to honor the very, very specific experiences that Tongans live when they are in our islands. So I'm living like an Indigenous American diasporic experience, and what I've learned is that the connection to our language is really, really important. It is difficult sometimes, especially if you're not, haven't been raised with your language. Reclaiming it is really important because that actually does create a connection to your land. As I explained with the concept of fonua, it's also another thing of learning different vocabulary and then being able to speak your language and string those words together, almost like you're stringing together a shoreline. So for me, it's my Indigenous identity is informed by trying to find my language and ways in which to practice it, and also to honor the fact that for me, it's important to learn. And that is why there's so much work in the definition of Tongan words in my work. That's the Indigenous practice of getting into the roots of those words, and then being able to also practice learning to fluency, and then also having to figure out how to like squeeze English in there somehow.
Thank you. And I would just interject that I'm sure many of you know this, but language loss and language erasure is a prevalent part of Indigenous communities, not because we don't want to speak our language or we grow up deciding that we don't want to do that we'd rather learn English to assimilate or fit in, but there's so much generational trauma around language loss in many of our communities because our parents were forbidden to speak it, would be punished for speaking it. And so their own trauma often prevents them from teaching that to us because they don't want that experience for us. So I think language reclamation is so difficult but necessary. And for my own personal experience, Lee is someone who I always think of when I think of how hard it is to learn Hadza, tomorrow. Because I took my complaints to Lee one time and was like, oh, it's just so hard because the classes are at this time and it's all of these reasons. And Lee is like, okay, you still need to learn it. So,
I mean, that was the essence.
You were so much nicer.
Okay, I think you should still go.
Yeah. That might have been your intention. But what I heard was like, you still, it doesn't matter how hard it is, if you want to get closer to your own identity, your own history, you have to get closer to the language because it's there providing that information for you.
It's hard to learn, but it's harder to learn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Yes, so with this question, I want to first recognize there's so very many ways how people describe or define the word Indigenous. And I say this because I actually don't really self-identify as Indigenous, very specifically because my experience working with and growing up with and in relation to family and relationships with First Peoples and Natives. I really want to, I have deep respect for sovereignty and supporting their sovereignty in all aspects of their life, whether it's water, food, land, culture, governance. And I know because of the many, the many ways people argue and fight about what is Indigenous or not, and how, you know, are you talking about the census definition of Indigenous? Are you talking about the wider, the human definition of Indigenous? Well, in that case, I would say my identity is really much more in relation to land, reciprocity, allyship, and really in looking at beliefs and cultural practice, and primarily, you know, first and foremost, always respect for First Nations and their ways of living. But also, you know, you talk about language, and it's a huge thing. I'm one of many, many people whose parents immigrated from the Philippines, and who apparently, when I was in kindergarten, was almost fluent in Tagalog and Pangasinan. But because they were challenged not to teach us this, because they wanted us to assimilate, they wanted us to fit in. And you know, a lot of folks didn't know in language acquisition at the time, it's very natural, especially as a child, to jump over languages. That's how you learn. But when we started doing it, as with many of my cousins and friends when we were younger, once that, you know, mixing, jumbling of languages started, the parents stopped. You know, even if they were sticking their necks out to try to have us in the language, they stopped teaching us because they thought they were making us, you know, bigger. So that's huge. I guess that's my answer. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Next is, what first brought you to poetry, and what keeps you there?
I was exposed to poetry that I thought was like something that was really moving in my undergrad when I watched my friends do slam in a program called Word. And at first though, like I was like, I love this performance. I don't feel like I want to do it because at the time I was also focusing a lot more on like doing like collaborations and music with friends. So it was like the poetry art was in the lyrics that I was working on. But when I started grad school is when, and this is the first time that I was actually being taught by Pacific Islander faculty ever. That doesn't mean that we don't have teachers. All of our communities are teachers, but to actually see that represented in the ways that we are able to carve out space in academia for our people. I was at the University of Hawaii at Manoa in the English department, and it's the first time that I was actually taught in a formal way about like my people's literature, contemporary literature in English, also in our multiple different languages. And that is what really was like, oh my gosh, because watching Word was amazing. I'd never seen any Pacific Islander poets ever, never. And no one was trying to like find them either. So this was that exposure to seeing my own people's words. So thinking about Epeli Hau'ofa, who's a Tongan scholar and writer, Teresia. Yeah, I'm gonna start crying saying all these people's names. And also it's like, it's kind of hard because it's in those classes, Alice Tupunga Somerville, who's a literary scholar and poet herself from Aotearoa, yeah. She actually told us point blank in our Pacific Islander literature seminar, she was like, Indigenous people do not live as long, so get your shit out there now. And like, Teresia Tewa passed in her early 50s, Epeli Hau'ofa passed, Haunani K. Trask just passed. Like, we have so many of our people who pass young. And it really those classes really showed me the stakes of our words, like what happens when we don't speak our languages, when we don't tell the story. I think about Haunani and how militant she was, and that spirit that I have to carry with me, and the rage that comes through. I felt like that being surrounded by my people's poetry, and they're taking English forms, they're taking English and making it their own, and forming it and using these words in ways that were powerful to our people, for our people. So that's what brought me to poetry, and what keeps me there is because of the impact that it has for my students to see us writing, and then to also train them to write. Because so many people think that poetry is like this fluffy, like whatever. Poetry requires you to do extremely deep research. It requires you to be as precise as possible. It is exacting, and that's what keeps me there, is because of the stories that we have to tell. Given climate change, our people have the answers. We've had the answers, and so we have to tell the stories louder and better than anybody else can, because no one listens until you tell the best story as loud as you can. So that's what the poetry, because we're fighting for our people's lives. Like, how many of you had heard like Chamorro before you came here to this event? Other than the islanders. You know what I mean? You don't hear these languages every day. You have to get it in your mouth. We literally did with some like Prubechu and stuff like that, but hearing Tongan language, like, these are things that teach us how to be connected to the land in ways that the colonizer could never have imagined. So that's what keeps me in poetry.
So I was always the bookworm, nerdy little kid. I don't know if you guys in school ever had this program where they want to get you to read, so they'll say, read 3 books and you get a free ice cream.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
get more books.
Right, get more books. And the library was, of course, my refuge. But to be honest, the thing that first got me really intrigued in poetry, I was the sneaky little sister. I was sneaking into my high school older brother's backpack, probably looking for candy or something, and inside his backpack was the collection of E.E. Cummings' work. Yeah. And it was bookmarked at you guys probably maybe know this poem. It starts like, may I feel, said he, I'll squeal, said she. And I was like, 13. I'm like, huh? Different kind of candy right here, okay? So,
Not capitalizing this. What?
right?
What?
Right.
Lowercase
Radical,
e.
no capital letters. But so that's just, one way that kind of sparked my interest. But really, when I think about it, and I think this is familiar with many island cultures, BIPOC cultures, is that there's no separation from like, oh, you're a poet, or you're a musician, you're an actor, you do dance. It's all part of the culture. You can't go to parties without, elders or your parents telling you, oh, dance. That's for your aunties. Recite something, or play music. It's just whatever you think about that and the experience in my family, the fear goes away because you have to do it no matter what. So whether it's throwing down cardboard and learning how to, spin to break dance, or performing music, it's all part of my upbringing, part of the culture. But I want to just echo what you're saying in terms of when I first started out. I did my undergrad as minor in English and then MFA in writing and poetics, and just the erasure or invisibility of Filipino poets, island poets, native poets was very glaring. And so I would seek out the places where I can find my people. And share the energy and be inspired. And then also, I think about today, and I'm in the South Bay, and in San Jose we have now a youth poet laureate program, and they're so badass. They're like, no, we're gonna. And Lorenz was instrumental in creating that and making it happen. They have a team. They have a squad in both areas. It's not like one person to be the representative for all these people. And it's, to me, such a beautiful thing. Now I'm rambling. I don't even know if I remember the question, but I guess what keeps me in poetry is really my ancestors, and I don't say that jokingly because, and you might relate to this too well, is that if I'm not practicing and speaking the truth on a consistent basis, they will let me know by way of anxiety and mental depression. They will let me know. And from the nods, I see that I'm not alone. So it's a way of healing and also perpetuating the medicine and helping others find the medicine within their own needs.
Beautiful. Thank you. I will add too, and I'm thinking about, like, sometimes I'll refer to poetry, capital P, as a place that I try not to inhabit, and it's like, you know, the Hollywood side of American poetics, and I didn't call myself a poet. I didn't go to school to be a poet. I went to write stories, and then people didn't know what to do with my stories, and they're like, these are weird. And I was like, well, maybe it's poetry. And they're like, that's what it is. It's poetry. And so, I don't usually say that I'm a poet. I'll say that I'm a writer and an artist, because I think both of those things inform what gets put on the page. And you can determine if it's poetry or not, but I don't like all of the boxes of genre are also anathema to our cultures. Yes. Like, I wasn't a chanter until I decided I should. You know, I don't know if I still should be, but I'm going to. And you bring yourself, I think the work calls you to it. I'm gonna end on this because I think it ties everything together for us. Both of your works speak strongly to healing, to medicine, to language, and decolonial practices. And I want to know what brings you hope toward our collective liberation.
I can start again. My students really do bring me a lot of faith in the future. I don't know if y'all have been seeing some nonsense going on with the strike. My union, the California Faculty Association, was on strike earlier this week. So we're fighting for fair contract. And our own state board went behind our back and broke our strike. So you'll see more from us though. We're back on strike. But we fight for our students, and I didn't really feel really experience what that meant until maybe last semester. We've just been hustling so hard. I started teaching during the pandemic. I moved to the Bay, started teaching in 2020. So it's just been a hustle the whole time. But my students really do give me faith, and one of the things that, especially toward decolonization as not a metaphor, an actual practice, an everyday practice, one of the things that comes to my mind is an exercise that I do with my students in my climate justice class, and I also want to shout out Movement Generation. If you guys want to check them out, they're an amazing organization that talks about education on climate justice, not just climate change, climate justice and what that means. And we have to inform our youth about, basic, earth sciences, systems thinking. And so we teach them about the web of life. As cliche as that sounds, this exercise, if you want to actually run this exercise with your family, with your community, if you look up Movement Generation and look up the curriculum, it's right there. Please use it. It's super fun. You can do it with your family, you can do it with a whole group of people. But what it is explaining that biological and cultural diversity is kind of is the spider that holds the web of life together. It is what processes energy and allows us to live. Biological and cultural diversity, the more diverse a system, the more resilient it is, right? And so what we do is I have these streamers, and each one of my students has to name some sort of being in the Earth system. So they could be a microbe, or they could be a goldfish, or whatever, but they have to say hi, my name's Charlie, and I'm a goldfish, and you hold the streamer, and then you throw it to the other side. And 45 students, we make this web, right? And it's actually visually stunning when I have them lift it up and lift it down. I'm like, oh my gosh. But I usually have my spiders in the middle, Like, and what do spiders do? They sense when the web is in trouble. And so they have to tend the web of life, right? I'm the instructor and I have scissors. And I go over and then we say, like, I cut one part of the web and then we watch how long it takes for a spider, biological and cultural diversity, to heal that web, right? But I got scissors that I'm gonna start cutting more and more, faster and faster and faster. And this stresses out the spider. Biological and cultural diversity can't keep up with the cutting of the web, damming, burning the rainforest, like these sorts of things, and structural racism, like all of these things, you know, toxic waste dumps where Black and brown communities live, right? Cut, 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 cut. And what my students start to do is when they see me come in, they start to shift the web. And they're like, are we cheating? And I was like, no, you're doing exactly what what our systems do to mitigate this ecological degradation. But those scissors keep cutting and cutting and cutting. And one of the things that my students, I have not seen them do this yet, but I think they're getting there. No one tries and takes my scissors. And so we come to this idea of like, why do I have the scissors? Like, who gave me the scissors? And then also like the ontological and epistemological question of like, what are the scissors? Why do we have scissors? And so by the end of that class, which is usually week 3, week 4, my students crack me up because they're just like, I want to know how I can snatch them scissors. Like, I want to know, like, how, that's what, and the metaphor goes to the whole class. And now they start to notice the scissors. And they're like, look at this ordinance that's being passed. Those are a big pair of scissors. Like, look at this. It's like, and what happens is that you have to organize and you have to critique power. Just recycling ain't gonna save us. Like, this is a full systems change, and they get it in one lesson. They get it, and that's not just because like this is a fun little activity. It's because they're ready, and they give me hope because they're out there finding the scissors and they're out there dismantling them. So they give me hope.
Lee Kava, president. Putting out there. Lee Kava.
Turn on more years.
Next 7 generations.
I want to do that exercise. We should do that next Lumpia Fest. Big family party. Watch the elders destroy
Movement,
us.
honestly, movement generation. Actually, the elders would be like, someone snatch her.
Yeah.
Don't let me get up. Just like,
Yeah.
it's like, go get up.
I feel so, my hope comes from my nieces and nephews. They are the scissors right now. I can feel it, and I'm so hopeful and proud of them. When I have my 20 or even teen-something-year-old nieces and nephews articulating their words, speaking with agency about our culture and the ways that we need to restore justice and decolonize, I'm just like, you know, give me a chair with a back so I can like lean back and absorb you and be grateful for what you're learning and sharing out. I do have hope for that. You know, it's hard when you see the things happening, but you have, the imagination has to be respected so that you can move away from just this, you know, the doom cycle, right? Because there's so much more than that. You have to give people the power to, I love that.
Movement generation, y'all. I didn't come. Movement generation, Gopal, Diane, and all of them. Just shout out. It's free out there. Please go check it out.
Thank you both so much. I'm gonna close with us together by saying that this is something that brings me hope. I was quoting Toni Morrison earlier because Toni, but you know, she's one of her famous sayings is that if you see a story, if you don't see the story in the world that you want to read, then you have to write it.
Yes.
And I don't see the story that I want to read just out there in the world, which is Pacific Islanders coming together on the regular, sharing our art, sharing our culture. And that's a big absence and has been in my life. And instead of waiting for that to materialize and happen, I have to make that happen. And I'm finally I think at a point in my own artistic career and my own creative life where I know that that is what I'm being called to do. So I'm so grateful to have the platform, to have the space. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Kathleen, Flavia, for supporting this and just giving us the space to connect. I know this has been a very healing thing for me. You can feel the medicine in the room. Enough said. I'm so grateful to have this community and my family around me. Thank you so much for attending. Demand more Pacific Islander representation in your art spaces. If you enjoyed this event, you can tell some folks sitting over there how much you enjoyed it. And just know that we're here, we're part of the community, and we deserve more than to be an afterthought. We deserve more than a month for our work. So hopefully this is something that we can build together. Arlene.
Yes. There's more medicine as you're going on your way out, or if you're going to check out the incredible works downstairs. Please, I would be remiss to not shout out Lenore Chinn, who's here. She's a constant documenter. She is part of the Bay Area Now group of artists that are in the exhibit. If you go down, right at the top of the stairs,
Just out here.
right here, are her photographs and some video installations, so please go check it out. Lenore is OG, SF, Bay Area Now, always and forever. And yeah, thank you for sharing your art and work.
We have another announcement of stuff. For more art as well, if you want to hop on over to the East Bay, Nicole, who is an amazing poet, also from the Moana Nui, coming from Aotearoa, will be reading and premiering their chapbook, new chapbook out last week, y'all. And Nicole, where is that happening tonight?
Yeah, so it's happening at Art Together. It's part of the homemade series over in Brooklyn. Yeah.
So if you want to hear more about Pacific Islander poetry that's going on tonight, hopefully. Thank you so much for holding it down on that side.
There's probably still more food. Please eat it. And we can just enjoy each other's company for however long we'd like. I think we're at the close of the formal part of the gathering. But again, Saina Ma'asi, thank you so much for coming.